Hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review such as it is of Dragon Age Inquisition. So what started as a little bit of a side project is now turning into a bit of a weekly fixture where I've been going back 10 years ago, 2014, and checking out some older classic games and reviewing them, 10 years removed. I'm also using this as an opportunity to sort of engage with my community, so maybe you just randomly found this and this is your opportunity to get involved, where I'll talk about the game that I reviewed this past week, which is this, Dragon Age Inquisition, but I'll also bring up the game that I'm going to review this following week, and I try and aim for things that are on sale or special or whatever. So perhaps you don't have disposable income, you're overwhelmed or even underwhelmed by some of the showings of modern games these days, but you just want to play a weekly game on the cheap with a community. Well, this is your opportunity. So this week I'm going to be reviewing Watch Dogs, which, if you followed me for any amount of time, you'll know this is one of my favorite games of all time. I think it was done dirty in reception, but also they kind of bungled it with their vertical slice drama at E3. But we'll cover that towards the end of the video. So if you want to get involved with this, links will be below. Come join the Discord and we can discuss, shoot us a friend request, that sort of thing, and tuck into Watch Dogs for this coming week, and I'll review it pretty much this time next week. So first, Dragon Age Inquisition. My background, my credentials. I played Dragon Age 1 back in the day and I loved it. It was really good. It was a great time for gaming for sure. I missed Dragon Age 2 and I can't remember why, but I do remember there was a lot of negative reception around it. I'm pretty sure it was condemned broadly for not being Dragon Age 1, but I think some of its mechanics were a departure from what was kind of established. And Dragon Age Inquisition was sort of heralded as a bit more of a return to form. I played through it back on the console on PlayStation 4, I guess. 2014 was actually a pivotal year for me where I really jumped across and started in indie gaming, PC gaming in earnest. So I hadn't played this on PC. And I remember really enjoying it. Got right into it, loved it. I clocked it. I've checked how long to beat. Apparently the story takes like bloody 40 hours or something to beat. That didn't happen here. In the end, I've only really put in somewhere between probably around the 7-8 hour mark, something like that. But I think I can render some thoughts as well that would be helpful. And if I do manage to play more of it over the course of the year, perhaps there'll be a follow-up video. So it's not the most exhaustive review. However, I would like to change that with these classic games, and I will endeavour in future to really try and get through more of them in the week. But I still would like to share some thoughts around this because I actually have some interesting ones, both positive and negative, I suppose. So at its core, it's definitely a Dragon Age game, and while I am ultra rusty when it comes to this lore, I still remember to this day the cornerstones of what made it great, or at least enough of it. Things like the idea of the chantry. You have this whole magic world which is really original, and look, I'll just give you the Soldiers 5 and I'll probably butcher it, but you might find it engaging as well. But the idea is that you have mages, and magic is treated a little bit more of a sort of, well, it's not a stand-in for guns on the street or anything like that, but it's definitely a power jump compared to the common man, which is, unusual for fantasy. Generally, magic is just, another version of a bow and arrow. Generally speaking, magic is usually accepted as kind of just normal for a mage. But the whole idea is that it runs very close to the sun with regards to controlling it and demon summoning and all that sort of stuff. So as I understand it and remember it, you have the mages, but they're also sort of running in parallel with the Templars, which are like a sword and board kind of militarized protection racket. It depends how you want to look at it, but it all of this is fairly, what I would say, organic world building. You have mages that are very powerful and they kind of ride the lightning, and it doesn't take a lot for them to sort of lose control of their power and become like an actual kind of weapon of mass destruction problem. So the Templars are a police force to keep them in check and be on standby to, delete them if they need to. And there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff that comes out of that, like phylacteries, I think it's called, where they keep a sample of every mage's blood on record, so that if they do go like apostate, or if they decide that fuck it, I'm going rogue, I'm leaving, or they run or whatever, that they can be hunted down by the Templars. And the cool thing is the game generally speaking, I'm talking more about Dragon Age 1, but the world building, it doesn't necessarily put a moral what's right, wrong on you. It's more like this is the nature of the world and these are the rules that we have to work within. And I think that's really, really interesting. Now, the reason for that setup is while in the very first Dragon Age game, there was more of a thread about, what are they called? Blight, Darkspawn, Wardens. There's these sort of Night Watch sub-faction, and that's who you're part of in the first game. And why it kind of works a little bit better, because it's a smaller scope beginning as this sort of world-ending zombie-adjacent threat invades the realm, and you quickly become a sort of a man of action at the center of that. And honestly, that arc is earned a little bit better, whereas in this game, in Dragon Age Inquisition, the overarching plot setup is kind of phenomenal. The combined Mages Guild and Templars, even in the opening load screen, walked hand in hand to some sort of summit. It's like a UN gathering where all the big swingers from both of these kind of big factions rock up for talks. And essentially this green rift thing explodes, detonates, literally when you press start new game. That's what kicks it off. And it essentially deletes all the people of powerful positions of these factions. And that is the whole kicking off for the entire narrative. And in the first area, for example, it's in shambles. Mages and Templars are openly fighting because they're in ruin, they have no leadership. It's all very fascinating, the sort of already interesting power structure, and then detonating a bomb on top of it, quite literally, creates all these spin-offs. There are now people vying for positions of power on both sides of the fence, and there are people that were conveniently absent from the explosion, and it's this huge mystery, who caused it? And you are this just random dickhead that was at ground zero. So a lot of fingers point to you at the beginning, and you have this tie to the rifts. You're the chosen one. You're the only one that can sort of hold your bloody hand out and close these rifts. So very quickly, you're sort of thrust into a position of power, and I actually find it to be unearned. What this game really feels like it's trying to do, in a way, is kind of be more of a sequel to Mass Effect 3 than it is kind of a sequel to the Dragon Age series. Don't get me wrong, all the world building and foundations are there, and honestly, the game sort of expects a lot of required reading. Like what I just explained to you is not really immediately overt. And I don't know how much, because again, I missed Dragon Age 2, but a lot of those fundamentals were really explored and interrogated in the first game, and it's what made the first game so good, because the world building, like I said, all these years later, how old is the bloody first game? Bloody 2009 Origins came out, so that's forever ago, and I still remember the sweeping broad concept. So that's definitely the strength. It's one of the coolest original worlds that they've built, and it deserves all its praise. But going straight into this game, if you hadn't played the first game, it would be overwhelming. And funnily enough, if you'd been playing through the Mass Effect series, again, not to go too circular, it really does feel like a Mass Effect 3 in medieval. And with that, it brings a whole host of problems, because you're not Commander Shepard. You didn't play 3 games growing as Commander Shepard, and honestly, the world universe-ending threat, not to get into Mass Effect, and it's been so long since I've played it, that's an earned arc with a super baddie over the course of the 3 games. And they're kind of trying to replicate this in this game in the first hour. And by doing that, you quickly go from who's this guy, is he a suspect, did he cause the bomb, to let's put him in charge of a new ancient order called the Inquisition that we're going to stand up in. It's sort of like martial law in a way, and he's going to try and unite the tribes and all. And it really does feel rushed and unearned how quickly you go from zero to hero, and immediately you command this faction. Now, a huge part of it is trying to grow it and grow allies and all that, but all of a sudden you've got people working for you, foot troops, agents spying in different regions, and it's actually quite jarring how it is trying to emulate pretty much the exact structure of Mass Effect 3, which is, let's unite the tribes against the great enemy. It's doing the same thing here, but again, that part doesn't work. The other part, obviously the investigative part, trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with the rifts, and we want to close them. works quite well, but it just doesn't really run in concert of we're trying to build a semi-superpower, unite everyone against a great threat, and it's sort of like, why? Or you're pitching it to me wrong? So I think it really misses the beat. And in a way, and again, this would be speculative, I feel like maybe they're trying to over-engineer it. You have such a wonderful world in Dragon Age and the fundamentals of it, and I think maybe they're trying to follow their predecessor, and they've overcomplicated it. So parts of it really work. And again, I really think that conceit of this detonation, and it throws questions over everyone and everything, and then also how do you it's almost post-apocalyptic in a fashion of everything could decline. You've got other factions, the Tevinter, I think they're called, from the south, and they're more of an indentured servitude faction. They're getting involved into the power vacuum. So, not to use the old Game of Thrones adage or anything like that, but the politics of the world are actually kind of interesting. The systems and how you interact with them are so shit. It's kind of bloated in many ways. You have this unnecessary sort of war council where you have to unlock different factions or different missions and all that by sending agents, and to do that you need power points, and to get the power points you just have to grind closing rifts and side quests, which is a little bit lazy in its implementation, and you find yourself going, pull this whole thing out of the game and just make it linear. So it's sort of attempting to I don't know what it's really attempting to do. Try and make it look like tracking the growth and power increase of the Inquisition proper. But regardless, that really doesn't work, and it just feels like a pain in the ass. I just want to do the next story mission. I just want to keep going because I really think the story's quite strong. But in order for me to unlock the region to go talk to the Templar offshoot or whatever, and I don't want to get into it too much, I have to kind of just eat shit and just grind boring side quests. Some of them are good, some of them are, deliver bloody flowers to this prick's wife's grave because he can't travel the road because it's dangerous. Like, okay, sure, and it suffers from this problem. All of these games suffer from it. Witcher 3, people point out as well, like, why am I doing these side quests, interesting as they may be, when the world is literally ending? Like, I find that dissonance is still a bit of a problem in modern game design now, but you can definitely see it here. So look, I'm not necessarily trying to bash the game, because again, the main story, and I'd love to keep chipping away at it too, but they've just put all these hurdles in the way, and I only really allocated myself a week, and it was a very busy week, to be honest, non-stop bangers. Taking up a lot of my time, but that's more of a me problem. But my point is, getting through the main story just has unnecessary bloat, and it's infuriating. On top of that, a lot of the systems as well, the sort of leveling your character's skills up RPGs feels, it's okay, isn't exactly the highest praise, but then you have all these crafting alchemy systems, collectibles, crafting weapons and that, and it's not fun to do any of that stuff. And all I'm really doing is just equipping the highest gear score weapon to my dudes, run into the fight, and I just push my luck until the game finally wipes me. Basically, you run out of potions eventually and you lose your fight, and then you can just press continue and it will spawn you nearby, and you can just go in a different direction and maybe, re-equip your dude. So I'm only really checking my equipment every couple of hours because the trap of getting into that tedium is ever present. However, again, I'm not bashing it because the combat itself is so fun. It actually works really well. There's this lumbering, slow quality to it. It kind of has, canned animations, but then like I'm running a two-handed sword with like a counter build, so you sort of watch their telegraph and pull your counter up, and you do that, and then that knocks them to the ground. Then I can hit them with a thing that synergizes with knocking them on the ground, and I mostly just let my party members do whatever the fuck they want, right? Because engaging with the system just with my dude on his own is really fun, and it doesn't really get old. So it's one of those games, there's some brilliant stuff in here. Like, that combat loop is great fun. The story, the main story and narrative is really good when it goes. Some of the characters are hit and miss, more miss than hit so far. But like Blackwall, the warden, I recruited him, and the bald elf, I hate elves, but the elf in my party seems actually really interesting. But, all the other characters, like this Iron Bull dude and Cassandra, oh my god, they're just giant insecurities walking around on legs. And anyway, I suppose you could argue it's got something for everyone. but kind of the character writing and development so far is just so... like I can see 2024 writing starting to sneak in here. So it's a cool game. I'm glad I played what I did play of it, and I wouldn't mind chipping away at it over the year to get more done. But it is one of those things, it demands an unreasonable amount of investment when I'm just enjoying moving through the world, reading some of the side stuff, building up the, there's the stanzas and poems and crap, and I can't be bothered reading any of that crap. But like some of the sort of anecdotal stories, some of them are really interesting. And the main story seems really good. And again, I have that nostalgia. I remember clocking it. I must have had a lot more time on my hands and a lot less good indie games to play, to be perfectly honest. But like, it's a really good investment and a great story, but you have to be willing to put dozens and dozens of hours into just grinding to unlock the condition for the next step. And that's a bit unreasonable now for me and the time available to me. Anyway, geez, I don't want to waffle, but this is a review and I take my time with it. Still would recommend it, still would recommend checking it out, but you really have to zero in on it. You have to reconcile that it's going to waste your time a bit, but there is still some great stuff in there. Now, onto Watch Dogs. On the end of it, I'll just put a little bit of an overview. I revisited and played an hour today, just, to dust it off. Again, full disclosure, I love Watch Dogs to death, and in case it's not clear, pick it up. It's on deep sale right now. If you're watching this, I try and drop this video as close to the Tuesday, which is when Steam does their weekly sales, and I'll try and be way more militant about that in the future. That gives you a week of this video being launched, right? And if you're watching this in the future, maybe I'm still doing this system down the track, and so you can get on board with whatever it is I'm covering now. But yeah, pick it up cheap, join the Discord, shoot us a friend request or whatever, just get involved. So yeah, Watch Dogs I've come back to over the years many times, so it's still kind of fresh. I think I even attempted a playthrough of it early in the year when I was still playing with the episodes, because I love this game to death. It is absolutely leveraging and has inspirations of the sort of literally me meme movement of, strong silent types that was pioneered very much in Drive. In fact, if you wanted to say it's Drive, the video game, I wouldn't be against it. There are aspects of it, especially the way that police chases cat and mouse and run out. You can sort of turn off your engine and lie back in your seat and hide in alleys while the police are looking for you. Like, it has some really, really fun cat and mouse police chases, but the story is just so good, and it really will appeal to a certain male audience of which I inhabit. Again, this is only supposed to be just a quick overview, but basically your dude Aiden is this sort of Batman vigilante type dude in a modern tech age. The whole gimmick is this prototype CTOS network that is super Big Brother 1984 played out in, is it Chicago? I think it is, as a bit of a test bed before nation rollout, and it explores all those ideas. Are they just monitoring the streets and security? Are they monitoring citizens' personal stuff? And, the really interesting thing is that your interest in this is a straight revenge story. Your actions got your niece killed as part of a sort of revenge payback gone wrong on you, and your character is sort of, grief-stricken and on the warpath, and through that you come up against all the criminal elements that are also sort of doing their own nefarious stuff. But you've got DeadSec, which are a big player throughout the whole Watch Dogs series, and they're peripheral here. You're working in tandem with them because it suits you, but you're not ideologically possessed like them. And that's kind of why this story is evergreen and it still works, because it's not asking you to have any sort of ideological bent or anything like that. You are very basically just a man on a revenge mission. But it still holds up graphically. It looks great. I really like the world design. I like the character design. It's sort of prototypical Fortnite stuff, that in a way there is exaggerated emotions to the characters. It's sort of caricature. It's not really hyper realism, and it makes it hold up longer, despite all the graphical complaints that everyone had around the E3 vertical slice at the time. And it got so much backlash, and it was very much a straw breaking the camel. That sort of shit had been going on forever, where at E3, a game company would present their game, but because it's a vertical slice, it was hyper optimized and used as an ad. And this one was the turning point where people basically said, no, we don't like this, because the graphics on the Watchdog teaser were hyper realistic and hyper polished, but within that, 2-minute showing, and it looked nothing like what the final product looked like. And that got real mainstream traction and really, really hurt Watch Dogs. I'm not defending any of it. Like, it was on the collision course. Someone was going to do it, and it happened to be this game. It just happened to be a brilliant game also that holds up incredibly well. Anyway, check it out yourself. It's super deep, and I'll review it in a week's time basically at the end of the sale. Okay, cool. I don't think we need to waffle any more than that. I would have liked to have put more time into Dragon Age, but I'm not who I was 10 years ago. And yes, there is a brilliant game in there, but it's buried in a lot of bloated mechanics, and it's kind of expecting your kind of goodwill and engagement from what you had in Mass Effect 3. I feel like if I went back to Mass Effect 3, I would be still critical of these bloated, recruit all the agents mechanics, but the scrutiny would be of a less caliber, because in a way the developers had earned that off of you with the investment of Commander Shepard over the previous 2 games. I could be off base, but that's just how I feel, and I'd love to play Dragon Age. I would, but I just feel like it's not treating my time with the same level of respect that I kind of feel a lot of newer, smaller games would treat it. But I'd be curious what people think. Anyway, team, might just leave it there for the time being. I'll catch you guys on the next one.